Welcome to Talent Freaks with Andy Coon. I'm Andy, a filmmaker and photographer based in the Bay Area of California. This podcast explores the creative journeys of fascinating individuals who bring unique perspectives to storytelling, filmmaking, and beyond. In this episode, we're revisiting a conversation from 2006 with Brett Ingram, an award-winning documentary filmmaker known for his deep dives into visionary artists and unconventional storytellers. At the time of our discussion, Brett had already gained recognition for his film Monster Road, which explored the life and mind of legendary animator Bruce Bickford. His work has continued to shine light on untold stories, blending meticulous research with artistic sensitivity. Now, before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and rate Talent Freaks on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others discover these incredible stories, and I am incredibly grateful for that. So now, let's jump back to 2006 and let the younger version of me introduce Brett Ingram. Formerly an electrical engineer on the Space Shuttle main engine program, Brett Ingram exchanged his pocket protector for a movie camera in 1990. His short documentaries and animated films have won 30 awards collectively, screening at more than 150 festivals and cinema venues internationally. Ingram's first documentary feature, Monster Road, won 16 awards, including Best Documentary at the 2004 Sundance Film Festival, and screened at more than 80 festivals and cinema venues internationally before premiering on Sundance Channel in 2005. Ingram has twice been awarded a Film and Video Artist Fellowship from North Carolina Arts Council. He teaches filmmaking in the Department of Broadcast and Cinema at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Ingram is currently working on Rocaterrania, a new documentary feature about the secret world of visionary artist Renaldo Kuhler. I sat down and we talked about his professional life before documentary filmmaking, what he's doing now as a profession, and what's in store for him in the future. Here we go with a conversation with Brett Ingram. Enjoy. Thank you, Brett Ingram, for stopping by and having a conversation with me.
Glad to do it.
Thanks again. I read on your bio on your website, your Monster Road DVD website. Your bio said that you started as a NASA science engineer.
I was an engineer, yeah. And just I'll try to keep it brief, but basically all through school I sort of excelled at math and science. And I grew up in Kernersville, and there aren't a lot of people that from Kernersville that go on to have professions in the arts for some reason, or at least I didn't know anybody that did.
Or what about NASA, though? I mean, not too many NASA scientists come from there.
maybe not. But the thing was, I was always pushed to go towards something practical that you can make a living at. Okay,
Makes sense.
I was pushed towards science, and so gradually gravitated towards engineering. And so I studied engineering at NC State as an undergrad, electrical engineering. And then I'd always been I grew up in the sort of the age of Apollo, and I just, loved the Apollo space program. And I always wanted to work for the space program. I was a little naive at the time. And when I finally went to work I was actually working for Honeywell, which is a subcontractor of NASA, to do the controllers that control the rocket engines on the space shuttle.
Mm-hmm.
And once I got in there, I quickly became disillusioned. And at the same time, there were all these sort of latent creative urges that I had to write stories, to take photographs, to do something creative. And luckily, I was in a position where, the job was extremely bureaucratic, if you can imagine that, working on the space program right after the Challenger disaster.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to make any sort of changes or do anything. There was no creativity whatsoever to the job. And so I think all those pressures sort of pushed me into just saying, you know what, I'm just going to quit and I'm going to do something creative. I don't know what it's going to be.
Wow.
So I did.
And where did you go from there?
I was living in Florida, so I moved back to North Carolina, and I actually became a reporter for the Kernersville News.
No kidding.
Yeah. So they had an opening for a newspaper reporter, and they didn't require really any journalistic training. And I knew the publisher, and he said, well, if you can write and you can take photographs, you can do the job. So I did it. And I loved telling people stories and the sort of access that journalism gives you to worlds that you wouldn't normally, you can't walk up to a construction site and say, hey, I'd like to come in and ask you about what you do. But if you're a journalist, you can do that.
Right.
And you can go into all kinds of worlds. And so I love that. And I think that's what drew me initially to documentary filmmaking. It was sort of a logical extension of that. I was like, well, if we just take writing stories and taking pictures and make it moving pictures, well, now we got documentary.
So how many people worked at the Kernersville newspaper?
Oh, maybe 6 or so were on the staff, as far as the publishing aspect of it. And then we had like a whole printing process in the basement. They printed brochures and other newsletters and stuff. So,
But where was like the reach? Did it go out to Greensboro, Winston-Salem?
No. It was I don't know I don't know what it is now, but I know at the time it was a bi-weekly newspaper. It came out twice a week and was really only the Kernersville, Walkertown, Blues Creek.
That makes sense. I mean, where I grew up, we had a Montclair Times that came out once a week. So, I mean, just sometimes, I mean, we also had the Star Ledger came out daily, and it was for, New Jersey newspaper.
Yeah.
So I understand.
And I think another thing I loved about it was that it was, I mean, if you're writing for the Kernersville News, you're not writing about the hot news that's happening around, it's not like writing for the Greensboro News and Record or something. We could do feature stories. I mean, every story I did was like a feature story. So it was like I just find somebody I thought was interesting and pitch it, and they'd say, sure, go ahead. So I had a lot of latitude and freedom to write about what I wanted to write about. So it was fun.
So did that help you get into documentary filmmaking?
It did. I had just a VHS camcorder at the time, and when I was working at the Kernersville News, I found out that they were tearing down the old elementary school that had been there almost 100 years. It was a fire hazard, and they needed to build a new school, and so and it was a school I had gone to, my dad had gone to, my grandparents had gone to, and the more I looked into the history of it, I found out it was really the center of social events in the town back 50 years ago. Like they used to have these huge 4th of July celebrations with Ferris wheels and people on horseback jousting and boxing matches and unbelievable stuff. And then, flash forward to now, and there's really nothing happening there except for school. So I thought that was really interesting, and I decided to make a documentary about the history of the school. So in the course of 6 weeks, now you'll appreciate this, in the course of 6 weeks, I made an hour-long documentary about the history of the school.
Wow.
So you can imagine what the quality of this thing was. I didn't know what I was doing, and I did it in 6 weeks. But I loved doing it, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Oh, so you did that six weeks in an hour.
Yeah, an hour-long documentary.
It was all VHS?
Yeah.
Tape to tape?
Yeah, tape to tape.
Wow.
I edited it in 1 week.
Did you use 2 VCRs?
No, actually, the what was it? The Forsyth County school system had a AV department, and they actually had a, whatever you call those tape. It's tape to tape, but it's a actual shuttle system, And so
linear
tape, yeah.
And you that's impressive.
They were going to be on vacation for a week, and so they weren't going to be using it. And so this guy came in the first day, and he spent an hour showing me how to use it, and he said, "Well, good luck. See you in a week."
So how many hours did you have of footage?
Oh boy, I don't really remember. Not that much considering what I shoot now. I mean, at the time, I think maybe, I don't know, 20 hours, maybe 15, 20 hours.
That's still a lot.
That's still a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for 6 weeks to come up with an hour. That's crazy. I'd like to actually see it, to see where it started from, where it all came from.
I should watch it again. I haven't seen it in probably 15 years. So.
Wow, that's interesting. So what was your next project after you did that? Like, when did you look at it and say, wow, I really know what I'm doing?
Oh, I still wonder about that, if I know what I'm doing. I'm constantly learning. I just, I decided to get some formal training because I didn't really have I'd never taken any classes in film history or, and I just thought it'd be great if I had some, some theory and history background as well as practical, hands-on technical training. So I looked around, and lo and behold, there was a program, an MFA program in film video production at UNC Greensboro, right in my own backyard. And so I applied and was accepted, and that was in 1991. And so for 4 years, I was studying there. And so the next thing I did was actually a 15-minute documentary. It was a class project, 15-minute documentary on my grandmother and her sister. So it was another sort of historical family kind of thing.
That's interesting because all right. I'm trying to piece up, because I was at UNCG from 92, but I dropped out and then went back in 94. So, and then of course I didn't get accepted into the program until 95. So
I was gone by then because in 94 I'd finished my coursework and was living in Raleigh. So we just missed each other. Yeah.
Yep. because I caused hell in that department.
You did?
Yeah. I don't know if they, I don't think,
I never heard about that. What were you in the MFA program then?
no. I
Okay.
didn't. It was all, I pushed to be in, I pretty much tried to basically do the grad work as an undergrad, like with my documentary.
Yeah.
Also,
That was a class project, was it?
it started out as a class project.
It's amazing.
And you could see where it started out as a class project if you watch the whole movie. You could see some of the interviews I first shot. It's kind of a little weak, but then again, that's where I learned how to do interviews, and it was just me holding a mic, looking through the lens and actually asking the questions at the same time. So, and then sometimes I would have to use a lavalier, sometimes a shotgun, sometimes no mic at all. Like with Kwame, we didn't have a mic.
Yeah.
So we just had to use the onboard mic.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. But
it still works out great. It's a great film.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, let's get back to you. But so you went to UNCG, got an MFA. And where did you go after that?
Well, I went down. I was living in Raleigh, and then I eventually moved to Durham. So for the next 7 or 8 years, I was doing freelance production work, working on everything from corporate videos to commercials to documentaries to cable television shows, whatever, and wearing a lot of different hats. Sometimes working as a producer, sometimes doing sound, sometimes shooting or editing, or when you're in a smaller market like North Carolina, doing freelance work, you oftentimes have to wear multiple hats. So I did that, and I got lots of sort of, I guess, hands-on experience in learning the craft and also somewhat of the business aspect of filmmaking, which I didn't get in grad school, which you can't get in grad school. And so that was really good and helpful. And then I just decided I wanted to go back into teaching, and so I applied for a job at Wake Forest and taught there for 1 year, and then I started teaching at UNCG 2 years ago.
Wake Forest, what kind of job position was open up there?
It was a 3-year position, 3-year lecturer position. So it was a great position, but it wasn't, after 3 years, my contract would be over and I could possibly be out of a job. So when the opening came up at UNCG and I applied, it was for a tenure track position and a lot more stability. So I jumped at that. So,
what were you teaching?
At Wake?
Yeah.
Some actual production classes, like we had a documentary production class, and we did a narrative production class, and besides that, I taught some film studies stuff, some like mass media classes and stuff like that.
So now at UNCG, what's your forte there?
Well, to serve the needs of the department, I'm mainly teaching cinematography and videography courses, and a little bit of editing. Hopefully in the near future, I'd like to move towards not away from that, but to also include teaching some documentary production courses and some other, maybe possibly some film studies courses as well. But right now they need me to teach cinematography, and I'm happy to do that and having fun with it.
Oh, cool. Now, how do you feel with the students coming in? Are they very astute, or you find some who are just like really want to do that, or others that just are in there just to get a degree? Because the reason why I asked this, because when I was in class, I wanted to do this. This was something I did, and I know other people that were in there just to get a degree, just to get an easy degree and move on.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's hard for me to fathom. Well, first of all, I'll say the graduate students come in there, and they're a whole lot sharper than I was. They know a lot more about filmmaking than I ever did coming in. And, they're very driven. Of course, they're older, and that's what they've focused in on more. Yeah. But in the undergraduate population, there's some people that are brilliant and that are really driven to do this. But then you're right, there are some that it's just a major for them, and I think that's hard for me to fathom, because when my undergraduate degree was in engineering, so I was like doing calculus and chemistry and all that stuff, and I would have given anything if I'd had a course where they give you a camera and say go make a movie. I mean, and so we have these students and we're doing that in these classes, and they don't even check the camera out, or just kind of like whatever. And so, but I mean, to each their own. So.
Right, but what do you get out of teaching?
What do I get out of teaching? Well, I enjoy the social interaction with people who are interested in studying the same kind of thing that I'm into. I enjoy relating. For some reason, I enjoy relating. Maybe it's the engineering in me. I love relating technical information like cinematography, concepts. I enjoy relating that to other people and getting them to understand it. And in learning how to relate it to other people, it helps me to understand it better myself. I've learned a lot this last year or so about cinematography, things that I didn't know before because I simply needed to be up on it to teach it.
Do you also get that feeling you're learning something too from the students?
Oh,
sometimes?
definitely. I learned something from. They all have strengths. They come in, each of them come in with their own strengths, and I learned things from each and every one of them. Yeah.
Well, let's transition into your documentary.
Okay.
It's Monster Road. Is that your first feature-length
It's
documentary?
my first feature-length documentary. Yeah.
And first of all, let me say how I ran into you. And it was down at Duke. They have that Center for Documentary Studies, and it was a Saturday class, which was about copyright issues, about fair use. And just kind of bumped into you. I heard your name mentioned around all over the place, around Greensboro. And so I was just like, Brett Ingram. And then we just started up a conversation. And then I learned about your film. You sent me an email, and I went down to the library at UNCG. What's that, Jackson Hall?
Jackson Library, yeah.
Jackson Library. And man, I was blown away. It was so interesting. And not only that, but it was shot so beautifully.
Oh, thanks.
And the character was so molded. Like, you just really felt a connection with a character, and you could understand like his mentality, and just that's what he loved to do. And he didn't care about anything else. That was him. And you portrayed it so beautifully. And right after I finished seeing that, I was just like, my parents would love to watch this documentary, because they're both art teachers. My dad's an art professor. My mom's an art teacher. And they just love films about that. But could you talk about how did you get the idea, and how did you find Bruce Bickford?
Well, I was lucky in that it was when I was a graduate student at UNCG in 1992. We had the Carolina Film and Video Festival, and Michael Frierson, one of my professors, and actually Michael Frierson, I forgot to mention this. The main reason I went to UNCG was the week that I started looking for graduate schools, there was an article in the Greensboro News and Record about Michael Frierson and his wife doing clay animation. And I was like, wow, they're doing that right here in North Carolina, right in Greensboro. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
So I had an interest in animation already, and Michael sort of stirred that in me. And so Frierson brought Bruce Bickford as a guest to the Carolina Film Video Festival. And I had never even heard of Bruce Bickford. And one day Michael Frierson came into the edit room, and I was working, and he said, hey, check this out. And he popped this tape in the VCR, and it was some of Bruce's animation. And I was just kind of blah, just kind of without words to describe what I was seeing. It's so completely unique and bizarre. And so I immediately was thinking, who is behind this? Like, what kind of background would lead someone to make work like this? It's so unique. And so I wanted to meet him. And so when he came to the festival, Frierson said, hey, why don't you, be in charge of sort of being his liaison and looking after him while he's here? So I did. And I think Bruce said about 2 words to me the whole week, because he just doesn't talk much, especially to strangers. But I stayed in touch with him. So that was in 92. And then 2 years later, went out and shot one interview with him. And then couldn't really afford to go on with the project at that point. So it was 6 more years until I had the resources to actually make a film about him. But during that time, we wrote letters and talked on the phone, and I got to know him better and better. And then the shooting process took. I shot for about 7 weeks over the course of a couple of years. My friend Jim Haverkamp. At that point, I had met Jim Haverkamp in Durham, and I had sort of explained to Jim, about this film I wanted to make, and he said, hey, I want to help you with it. So we went out to Seattle and started shooting on this thing, and we shot over the course of about 7 weeks over 3 years, spread out over 3 years.
Wow.
Because it was expensive. I would work freelance and save up some money, and then fly out to Seattle and stay for a week and shoot, and then, blow my wad and come back here and have to earn some more money.
So you didn't get any funding from any other resources?
When it really counted down towards the end, we were in post-production, I got a fellowship from the North Carolina Arts Council, which was, it saved me,
Yeah.
And I also got a grant from the Durham Arts Council, an emerging artist grant. So other than that, though, it was all sort of donations that people gave us, and then money I made from, most of it was actually money I made freelancing.
So you had, because he lived out in Washington State.
Seattle, yeah.
Seattle, yeah. So you had, like, how many, you're out there 2 weeks at a time, or?
I was out there a week at a time on, I'd say, 5 different occasions, and then one time I was there for, I think, almost 3 weeks.
That's impressive.
Well, he was kind enough to let us stay at his house too, so I had to rent a car because basically, I needed a car to get around, because it wasn't just interviewing him at his house; it was going around interviewing people that he knew and actually driving him around places, stuff like that.
Now, some of the other things on your website said that it made it into 80 festivals.
Yeah,
That's impressive. I mean,
well, we were really lucky. I mean, it really was it was well received at the first one that we screened at, which was Sundance. It won the best documentary there, and winning an award like that does wonders for you in terms of like visibility. Other festivals contacting you and saying, "Hey, we want to screen your film," or "We'll waive the entry fee," and so that helped a lot. And I was really surprised at the response. I mean, we set out to make something that was really personal, and I told Jim, I said, I'd be thrilled to death if one day this ended up on the cult shelf at the video store, and I don't think it's actually, maybe in a couple of stores, but not many, but it actually, did better than I thought it would. So,
well, you did, like you said, you made it personal, and that's what draws when you start watching it. That's what draws you in, and you get sucked in there because you start really trying to understand what kind of person he really is. I don't think you can ever truly understand it, but you do appreciate how he works and like the creative magnitude that he has behind him. Because it's just, I mean, it blew me away. That he is brilliant, but at the same time, socially, he's just, he's secluded.
Yeah.
Like he just really doesn't want to branch out. So how did that change him as, when you put out this documentary about his life? How did that change his life?
Well, he's actually gotten a lot more interest in his work. I mean, there are people that have come out of the. I mean, he has fans all over the world from back when he was working for Zappa.
Mm-hmm.
People that had appreciated his work for all those years and thought that he was no longer making films, or they didn't even know if he was still. They didn't know nothing about him, and so it's been a sort of a renewed interest in him. And he's basically, a number of things have happened. He's gotten art shows in New York, and he's currently got a show right now at the American Visionary Art Museum in Baltimore. He's had his work invited to different festivals around the world. I think out in New Zealand and Australia and Spain, and so there's been a renewed interest in his work, and also works for hire. There have been people who wanted to hire him to do contract work as an animator. As a result of that,
you got to understand that you had a big role in helping him get that exposure. How does that make you feel that, you did have a helping hand? I know that wasn't your intended purpose, but it happened.
Well, it was kind of the agreement that we had, I said, he's a very reclusive kind of person, very private person. And I said, Bruce, I want to make a film about you and your work and your life. And how do you feel about that? And he was kind of like, well, I don't know. And he said, but, he goes, it would help get my work out there. And so it was kind of the trade-off that we had. He allowed me into his life to tell his story. And the trade-off was that he would get exposure, And it did make me feel really good to be able to get his work seen by more people, because I really think it's been appreciated by a certain cult audience around the world. But only the stuff that Zappa put out. I mean, really, Bruce has never put out his own stuff that he's done since then. And he's been working for 25 years since then.
And probably consistently on a daily basis, too.
Oh, yeah. Every day, all day. Yeah.
All day, all night. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did he live? I forgot. I mean, it's been a while since.
That's one of the biggest questions I get after the people have seen the film. Right after they've seen it, they ask that because it's not really spelled out. But basically, his parents supported him. When he came back from working for Zappa, he moved in with his mom back in the house that he grew up in, and his parents were divorced then, and his mom supported him, and I think his dad helped him out some. And then when his mom died, Bruce inherited the house, and then his dad got Alzheimer's, and the roles reversed. Bruce was now taking care of his dad,
right?
But he was managing his father's pension and all that. So,
wow.
So he lives extremely frugally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't drive around any cars or anything. And
no.
He just dresses to dress.
Yeah, and I mean, it actually worked out really well continuity-wise, because like I'd be filming with him, for a whole week. He'd wear the same shirt the whole week, and then I'd come back 3 months later, and he'd still be wearing that shirt. Because he just doesn't,
Yeah, he's the same person,
and he's clean. He just believes in wearing something until it's worn out.
And how old is he?
I believe he will turn 60 in February.
Because he was climbing trees like a little kid. And he's in incredible shape.
He has, on the one level, there's this real childlike spirit that he has, this sort of immortality that he has to his spirit. And then at the same time, he's very nimble and strong and lean and healthy, and every day he goes out and swings on this high bar that he had built in his backyard, like a gymnastic high bar. That's what he does for exercise, and then he also climbs trees for exercise.
That's great.
You don't meet too many 60-year-old men who climb trees for exercise.
No, not at all. That's one thing I like about working with documentaries is you get to know the people, and they become they don't become friends, but they become more. It's almost like family because it's really intimate. You get in there and you start editing, you hear what they're saying over and over again, and you start to really reveal the kind of person that they are. Because most of the times when you meet a person, just meet anybody, you talk, and a lot of things just, they go right over your head. You can't really grasp what people are what their real base of who they are. But when you're editing, you're hearing it over and over and over again.
And every nuance of how they say things.
Yep.
You're right. It borders on obsession, or maybe it doesn't even border. Maybe it is obsession. That you have to be almost obsessed with something like that to carry it through, because you know what it takes to make a film, and it's not easy. And so the time you have to spend sorting through everything someone has said, and how am I going to make a story out of this? And there's a level of obsession there. I would say I'm as obsessed with making documentaries as Bruce is with making animation. So,
what's your biggest fear about doing such a personal documentary like that? I mean, because for me, I want to make sure I portray the truth, but at the same time, I don't want to embarrass, which is really difficult because they're accepting that this is going to be a part of the documentary, but at the same time, you don't want to look like a fool,
right?
Because that's your professional.
That's the biggest challenge that I'm dealing with that on a film I'm working on now, is just, how to walk that line between, you want to create an accurate, fair representation of this person and their life and how they are, but at the same time, you don't want to cause any harm to them or hurt their feelings, or, set them up in a position where people can laugh at them, or, there's a lot of ethical aspects to documentary filmmaking that most people aren't really aware of, especially when you're doing portraits of individuals. If you're going after Enron or something like that, I mean, people are expecting you to just pull out all the stops and bash the hell out of them. But if it's a person off the street that you've chosen to document their life, there's a whole different thing going on there.
See, and I'm trying to reflect, and one of the things I like about doing this conversation is, like, I like to pick the brains of the people who I talk to about certain things. And the next documentary I'm trying to put together, and I don't even know if it's going to be what I even think it's going to be, is about, have you heard about the story of Gil Barber? About the kid who was shot by a Guilford County police deputy. No. This happened about, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. And
I wasn't living here. I don't know about that.
It's a really awkward situation. His car went off the side of the road. This is according to the police report. He broke into a church across the street with his bare fist. He bit into a collection plate and pulled out 4 teeth. He's African American also. He was bleeding from the mouth. They said he disrobed in the church. There's blood, fingerprints or palm prints all over the church. And then he ran out into the street. By the time he came out into the street, that's when the deputy arrived. Uh-huh. And he ordered him to, freeze, pepper sprayed him. The kid kept coming, bloody mouth, butt naked, running towards him. So the officer, after he pepper sprayed him, shot him.
Oh my God.
3 times. This is what his father now told me, that the officer fell down. He stumbled back because his gun got jammed. He unloaded his pistol as a 6-shooter, reloaded while the kid was still standing above him after he already shot 3 times, and then shot him again 3 more times, killed him. Now, the thing is, like, with the officer, it's hard to point finger and be like, bad officer, or you did it wrong, or something like that, because you don't know what he's going through.
Right.
I mean, when he arrived at the scene, you see someone naked with a bloody mouth running after you.
Right.
you try to stop them at all costs because you fear. But at the same time, you have to also be considerate of the mental health of that person, whoever's coming after
I
you.
was going to say, was he like on PCP or was it a mental health thing?
Toxicology, nothing.
Wow.
No mental health issues at all. Never documented, at least. And his father swears that he never had like a mental issue. So it's kind of awkward. And he's already went through all the court systems to try to get some kind of justice out of this.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to get paid or anything. He just wanted the police to change their policy, because the year before previous to that incident, a kid in Greensboro was shot by the local police because he was running around naked with a butcher's knife, and he was feeding the neighbor's dog pieces of steak. And when the police arrived, he got up and ran away, and they shot him in the back.
Oh my God.
It's found out that he was bipolar.
Yeah.
So there's an issue in the community saying, so if somebody's running at you butt naked, there might be a problem. And try not to shoot him, especially if he's unarmed. Take him down. You're trained in those kind of tactics, but at the same time, I don't want to portray that officer,
right?
Because he's doing his job. That's how he was trained. Now the training might be flawed, but what I'm trying to get at now is I think the real story is what happened to that kid when his car swerved off the road. Yeah. There is absolutely no way. I don't believe there's any way that he went and broke into a church, pulled out his own teeth. Because if you've ever had a toothache or ever had your teeth pulled, you would have to have Novocaine. Because if you didn't, you'd be on the ground, passed out. Yeah. I mean, that's the way I'm thinking. Oh, yeah. He had, and they showed that his autopsy report, he had a huge welt on his forehead.
He probably hit the windshield or something.
There was no blood in the car at all.
Huh.
He also had 2 strands of his dreadlocks were pulled right out of his scalp. They were yanked right out. There's like a bald spot right there. And it's just, there are questions. There are all these questions that I have saying, what happened? Yeah. Some reported that the clothes were stacked in a pile right in the middle of the street. Some said that they were in the church. So just nothing makes sense. Yeah. And so the case is over. The father still is devastated by this. The community is still bringing up, they just had an art exhibit of police brutality, and his son was featured in there, like with the pictures, and people drew art. They did paintings, everything else, just based on what happened, because the story was so touching to the community. Now, what I'm trying to do is I have the footage of the father, I have the footage of the art exhibit, and I'm trying to post it online and trying to start like kind of a conversation or a community to talk about police brutality. But I don't want to ostracize this or alienate the police officers. I want to bring them into the discussion and to have their side, talk about, why they would be so aggressive, for their training or just from, in a fear factor, because they are human. I mean, if they're in a situation like that. So I really want to make it like a community-based kind of project and make it open too, like an open source documentary where people can add footage themselves of police brutality or, police training or just everything to kind of make it like, let's have this talk. Yeah. The community needs it. People need it. So that's where I'm at right now. And I'm not really sure how to piece it together. So if you had any ideas or...
I'd love to see some, have you shot anything at all yet? Or
yeah, I have everything chopped up already on my computer.
Yeah, I'd like to see some of that. That would be, gosh, I wouldn't know how to tell you how to begin though.
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. It's just, I'm kind of like biting my tongue. And
have you been able to talk to have you been granted an interview by the officer that was involved, or is that?
No, he actually, I don't think he wants to, he's had it rough since then. Okay. He's been divorced, and I hear, I'm not 100% sure, that he has an alcohol problem right now. And I think he resigned from the force. BJ Barnes is backing him 100%. He backs his men no matter what. He also tried to sue the father because he kept bringing it up. He kept going to court. So he tried to countersue him, saying, you're bringing up this past, it's ruining my life. And so it's kind of awkward. You have... the father whose son got shot and killed. Wow. And then you have the officer who was involved in that just kind of saying, my life is ruined ever since that happened. Yeah. Because obviously he feels terrible what happened.
Sure.
So it's just weird.
Yeah. Well, that's a tough one.
But it's a story that I think needs to be told, and
Sure.
people need to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know
I
don't know where I'm going with it.
Well, if you get some stuff cut together, I'd love to take a look at it.
Okay. So where does this lead you for your next documentary, the one you're working on now? How did it get started?
It's a documentary about another sort of interesting artist. It's a gentleman he's about 75 years old, and he's a scientific illustrator. Or he's actually a retired scientific illustrator at the Museum of Natural Sciences in Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
And I met him about, I don't know, I guess back in the maybe 96, 97. And he's just, I mean, once you meet him, you'll never forget him. He's just a real colorful character in the best sense of the word. I mean, he's just such a unique individual with a unique worldview. But he's a brilliant illustrator. And what I found out was that he had all these imaginary characters that he'd drawn that were up all over his office. And I kept asking, who are these people? And it took a while, but eventually he revealed to me that he had created an imaginary country when he was a teenager, and he'd been illustrating it in notebooks ever since. So like for the past 50 some years or more.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's this whole huge body of artwork that was secret or hidden and no one had ever really seen. And, you know, that in itself would be interesting. But what I found out was that it really, the history of the country is actually his life story told through the history of this country. So when certain things happen in this country, it correlates to some event in his life.
Wow.
So it's kind of an interesting situation. So I'm working on that. I've got about 45 minutes edited, and I think it's going to end up probably being about a 70-minute film or so.
So you're done shooting? I mean, might pick up some.
I may a few pick up stuff, but I'm about 99% done shooting. Yeah.
Was this funded?
No.
Wow.
Well, no, I take that back.
Sure.
It was not funded up until a couple of years ago, but UNC Greensboro, I've gotten a couple of grants through the university.
Okay.
That have been very helpful, and I'm hopeful of trying to get additional funding. I've applied several larger grants, but nothing has come through yet. But UNCG has backed me quite a bit, so
that's awesome.
Yeah.
One of my weak points is funding. I don't know how to go about doing it. I don't know, the right direction to go or anything. That's my weakest point, which I wish I had a stronger feel for it. But I guess you now have some pull behind your Monster Road.
It helped, and and the other source of funding that I have knows there's a private arts patron, I would say, someone who has actually come on almost as an executive producer on the film, who had seen Monster Road and approached me and asked me if I had any new projects in mind, and I did, and he said, I'd like to help you out with it. So he's backed it to some degree as well. So he's been extremely generous.
That's great.
Yeah.
So where do you see yourself after this documentary? I mean,
I don't know. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I don't even know if I'll make another documentary next. I might make a fictional film next. I don't know.
So that makes sense. Just get out of it and try something new.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
No problem, Brett. And did I forget anything, or would you like to say?
You covered everything.
Cool.
Thanks a lot.
And if anyone's looking for some classes, go check out Brett Ingram over at UNCG BCT program.
That's right.
Although you have to first go through a year before you can get into that program, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah. But cool. Thanks, Brett. I appreciate
Andy.
it. No problem. Well, I'd like to thank Brett Ingram again for stopping by and having this conversation. And one of the things that I got out of this conversation is no matter what you do, no matter what field you're in, if you want to do something like this, you have the opportunity, especially nowadays where the software is available, it's accessible, you can learn it in a relatively short period of time. But if you're interested and you want to make a change socially, or if you even want to do this for fun, it's simple. You could do it. But Brett is one of those people who is an example of doing something like that. He took it in his own hands. He went through a master's program, and now he is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, and you just cannot buy stuff like that. It's just remarkable. So thanks again, Brett. And I did learn before our conversation that Brett is due a little girl in April. So congratulations on that, Brett. And it looks like in your post-production life, you will have a little girl sitting on your side, rooting and tooting, especially more tooting than rooting in the beginning. Thanks for listening to this episode of Talent Freaks. Brett Ingram's dedication to capturing unique artistic voices reminds us of the power of documentary filmmaking to preserve and celebrate creativity. Whether through Monster Road, Rocaterrania, or his writing, Brett continues to highlight the stories of those who see the world differently. To explore more of Brett's work, visit his website at brettingram.org and check out The Secret World of Renaldo Kuhler, his book that expands on the themes explored in Rocaterrania. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast. It really helps more listeners discover these inspiring conversations. If you want to know what I'm up to, check out talentfreaks.com. That's where I host these podcasts, look for guests, and blog about my experiences. And if you have suggestions for future guests or topics, feel free to reach out. I'm always eager to bring new and exciting conversations to the podcast. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and stay curious.